Coming up tonight in the cruise view, Jewel of the Seas finally gets to show what she's got, as she has her only sea day of this journey. We also get to meet some of the crew and find out where they're from, and we head back to the 50s and 60s. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 4 of the cruise view on board the Jewel of the Seas. Today was Monday, September 21st, 2015, and as the 4th episode, that makes it the halfway point in this 8-night sailing down the Pacific coast. Today our noontime location was 41 degrees and 45 minutes north by 124 degrees and 51 minutes west. That put us roughly 28 nautical miles west of the port of St. George in Oregon, and throughout the day as we sailed on down the coast towards our next destination of San Francisco, we could see the mountains of Oregon the entire day long, and at no point did we actually get far enough from the land to truly be at sea in the middle of nowhere. At every point we could still look off of the port side and see the land right off in the distance. And as our only sea day, this was the day that most people took advantage of to experience the ship, and more importantly the pools. And as for the weather, it did for the most part cooperate today. We had a sunrise at 7:06 a.m. with a sunset at 7:20 p.m. And our high for today was 63 degrees, as well as partly cloudy skies. For the most part, it seemed to be cloudier in the morning and really clear up throughout the afternoon as the day went on. Throughout the day, we had steady winds. There were roughly 30 knots, and they were traveling with the ship, so there were roughly 15-mile-per-hour winds that you could feel across the deck, and it was coming from the back of the ship towards the front of the ship, which is a little unusual. Usually you feel it the opposite direction when traveling. We also had what appeared to be rough seas. According to the captain, there were roughly 10 to 12-foot seas out there. On board, we really didn't feel much. We were traveling in the same direction as the waves, just like the wind, and I think that really helped. They also seem to be very choppy waves, a lot of whitecaps out there, a lot of motion in the ocean, but there wasn't a lot of large rolling waves, which are the ones that usually carry the ship and cause more of the motion when you have those giant waves rather than this choppiness that's out there. But more importantly, we had absolutely no rain today. That is the first day of the sailing where we haven't had rain. It was completely clear and dry the entire day long, which was great because for our compass summary we had several items that took place outside. So this morning things started off in the Coral Theater with the Captain's Corner at 10 a.m., an item that's often found on sailings for guests to learn a little bit more about how the ship operates and ask questions of the captain and his team. Typically it follows a question and answer format and lasts roughly an hour. Sometimes it's a little shorter, sometimes it's been a little longer, but usually it's about an hour long. And it is primarily a question and answer session. Today's session, however, differed from the other ones. Instead of being question and answer, it was a presentation by the captain as well as the hotel director and the chief engineer, along with a whole slideshow of images and a video to show how the ship operates and go through the actual construction process of building and taking delivery of the Jewel of the Seas. A series of events that, of course, Captain Thor was present to witness himself, as he was the takeout captain for this ship. So they went through and explained all the different stages of the process, the construction, some inside little trivia and facts that most people don't know about, such as the fact that when they actually handed over the check to take delivery of the ship, it did not get approved because it was $12 short, when they wrote the check out to the shipyard to purchase the Jewel of the Seas, they did not include the bank transfer fee of $12. So they had to cancel the check and actually write a new one to cover that additional $12 fee on this $550 million vessel. Later in the day at noon, we did have a captain's noon announcement over the intercom system. It was actually a little bit earlier, about 11:56. And normally I wouldn't bring that up, but I thought it was important to mention because on the Quantum of the Seas, one of the big new innovations was that the captain's noon announcements were canceled, and in their place there were recorded segments that they posted on the TV. So each day the captain's noon announcement was actually a pre-recorded video that would loop on one of the channels. And that's something that was supposed to go fleet-wide, and as of January it did begin to go fleet-wide and was supposed to be on every ship. I'm not sure if they've changed that plan and rolled it back, or if the fact that it is port intensive and there has only been one noon announcement, most likely will only be one noon announcement in this whole sailing, they decided to keep the old style and actually do it over the intercom system as a ship-wide announcement. But I personally prefer those noon announcements over the ship system to ensure everyone actually gets the information, and it is much easier to actually watch than on the channel, so I appreciated that one. And immediately following it up on the pool deck was then the International Parade of Flags, an event that I've seen done on the Grandeur before, and I believe that time it was raining that day, so it was actually held in the Centrum. Today it was nice weather, so it was up on the pool deck, as it should be, and it featured, of course, several members of the crew, a large number of the crew actually, along with the captain and much of his executive staff, all with the flags of the nations parading across deck number 12 on either side of the ship and ending up on deck number 11 by the band stage at the end of the pool. And then Dennis, of course, the cruise director, hosted the whole event and went through all the different nations that we have crew members on board to represent, with several of them stepping forward to put on little performances of music and dance to show off a little bit of their country. And that even included the captain, who came out to do his own little jig to entertain all the people that came out to see the event, and it was a pretty good sized crowd for it.
And ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your hats. This is a surprise even for me. Please make welcome Norway! Led by our captain, Captain Tom Thompson. Yeah, baby, yeah! Wow! I've never seen him do that before. That was good. We got to book you for parties, I'll tell you.
And then immediately following that, they went straight into a little piece by the activities staff on board, nice little dance routine that they put on for everyone that turned out for the event.
Stop. Get funky. Check it out. They're dancing just for you. Everybody clap along.
And that also acted as a little bit of a preview as they then rolled immediately into a Zumba class with the activities manager, Daniel, an event that he's been hyping for the beginning portion of the sailing up to this point, and one that was actually very reminiscent of an event that Daryl held on board the Grandeur of the Seas as a late night dance party up on the pool deck, where it was very similar cardio workout routine up there to get everybody moving. And of course, with the nicer weather, that meant that most people did spend the remainder of that afternoon up on the pool deck, even after all those activities came to an end. For tonight's dinner then, it was a casual night, which is a little bit unusual considering it's the only sea day, that it was not a formal night since people had some extra time to get dressed up, but it was once again a casual night. And tonight's ingredient was pimento, which is also the Italian night for this sailing. So for me, I started with the minestrone soup, and then went with the lasagna al forno for my main entree. The dessert selection for me, at least, was the dessert sampler, which featured 3 different types of dessert, and one that I have gotten on several other cruises with this new menu system. And one of the things that really stuck out about that dish, at least, was that they did not use any of the special molds. Usually a couple of those items use special molds to make unique shapes and add a little style and something interesting to the plate. That was not the case with today's dish. I don't know if the Jewel's not using those molds or if they've gotten rid of them fleet-wide to sort of save some time. But it was certainly noticeable that it was done differently this time around. And once again, immediately following dinner, we had another 7:15 event for everyone on the ship between the 2 dinner sessions. This time it was the Battle of the Sexes game in the Centrum. And that featured, once again, the activities manager, Daniel, who this time did not show up in her place, was actually his sister, Daniela, to add a little extra fun entertainment to the event, which started out rather slow with something that's rather common, as I mentioned on the quantities with events in this time slot, a hard time getting enough people actually to participate in the game to put it on, but eventually they did get everyone and they were able to put it on, and of course it was entertaining. About halfway through, I think it matched up with a lot of people's times, and the Centrum really started to get crowded with people watching and enjoying the event, which was certainly one of the more entertaining of the Battle of the Sexes games that I've seen ships put on.
I'm going to fix the bumper. Okay.
And that was, in no doubt, mainly the responsibility of the activity staff, who are exceptionally outgoing and active. They really put themselves out there for humor and entertainment, and it's certainly noticeable in events like that where there's a very high level of comedy on top of just putting on the actual event. So it was certainly an enjoyable one for everyone. And of course, following that was then our headliner showtime for the evening with David Atkin, who was listed in the compass as being a comedic and interactive juggler, and that was certainly an accurate description of what he puts on. It's not the first juggler I've seen on a ship before. I've seen a couple in the past, and historically, juggling acts have been rather dull routines. They haven't, in my opinion, been the most entertaining of the acts that Royal Caribbean gets on. Tonight, I'm glad to say, was a very rare exception to that. It was probably one of, if not the most entertaining evening show that we've had on this sailing so far, and one of the more entertaining I've seen. In addition to the juggling, he had a very, very heavy layer of comedy on top, and that always makes things more entertaining. Juggling acts can sometimes get dull, but he had a lot of heavy comedy on it, a lot of satire, a lot of sarcasm, and it was definitely interactive. That was certainly not an over-exaggeration, as almost the entire show involved communication between him and the audience and pulling in people to do different routines and add even more humor. So it was a great show that it seemed like everyone enjoyed, and I think it really hit all the ages, and even in the people that were brought up, it covered all ages. So it was certainly a good show tonight.
7 balls. 7 balls. 7 balls, one at a time. Ooh, thank you, art lovers. Yes. Nice and steady. Speed and flat. Come on, people, let's hear those cheers. Yeah.
And once again, that rolled right into another event. At 10:15, we then had the 50s and 60s rock and roll party right here behind me in the Centrum. And of course, the parties are held on almost every ship. On the Voyager, the Freedom, and the Oasis class, they're held in the Promenade. On the Vision and the Radiance class, they're held right here in the Centrum. And of course, the Jewel is the last ship to receive her Oasisizing. She has not received it yet, does not have any of the Centrum WOW elements, and that was certainly noticeable during this event. It was actually more of a Groovy Town feel to this event than it was the 50s and 60s sock hop event that was held on the Grandeur, which of course has Centrum WOW. On the Grandeur, they of course had all sorts of lighting and elements to really bring the entire venue to life and make it really exciting and put on a little show. And actually during the sailing that had the 50s and 60s sock hop, the Centrum WOW was actually broken. Their light board was down, so they didn't actually have any of the lighting elements to utilize, but they still put on the show, and it was a fairly entertaining show. This ship does not even have that light board or any of that interactive lighting. For the most part, the venue stayed stagnant. There was really none of that element to it, and somehow it was still not even up to par with what the Grandeur put on. Was, like I said, much closer to what Groovy Town was, where most of the parties feature a DJ playing the music and the activity staff coming out and putting on a show with crazy outfits and doing all sorts of weird antics to entertain and get everybody moving. This was more of just a performance, really, of music. It really did not extend beyond that. It was an actual band, just like Groovy Town had, performing all sorts of music and dancing. And like almost every event so far, Dennis has taken charge of it, come out and actually sang for the entire hour of the event. He was pretty much the primary singer for the whole show, which I have to wonder if he wasn't here, just what would have made the event special, because that was certainly the highlight of the entire thing, was Dennis singing. And beyond that, there was one break towards the end where they did have three couples come out and do a little more of an interactive competition to pick the best dance couple, which was one of the things straight out of Groovy Town that we of course saw on board the Quantum of the Seas. So it really was much more in line with Groovy Town than 50s and 60s sock hop. And I'm not sure when the ship does get Centrum WOW, I'm not sure if it'll go more towards the way the Grandeur was, or if, since Groovy Town is actually newer, if it's going to head more in that direction. Personally, as I said on the Quantum of the Seas, this style is better for the people that want to dance, but for me, it's not really that entertaining to watch. So I hope they go a little more towards Centrum WOW with all the light, heavy, and more of an entertainment show. But that is the perfect segue into something that I mentioned yesterday I was going to do today, and that is a little more of a review of the ship and the Radiance class as a whole. Of course, going into the sailing, everyone tends to make some assumptions about what a ship and a class is going to be like. The Radiance class, of course, coming after the Voyager class, and not having a promenade, I assumed it would be very similar to my experience on board the Vision class, except with some elements of the Voyager class built in, since it did fall staggered in between those Voyager class ships. Surprisingly, that was not accurate at all, and I've seen a lot of people say it online that it is, but I really do not actually see much of the Voyager class in this ship. I actually, even though it came after, so I guess it's kind of the other way, I see more elements of this class that ended up in the Quantum class than I do elements of the Voyager class in here. It certainly is very similar to the Vision class, but it's still not quite the same. There's very similar elements to it and a lot of things that match up, but the Vision class, in my opinion, is actually even closer to the Voyager class than this ship that came after the Voyager class. So, of course, the Radiance class and the Millennium class I mentioned during our Quantum sailings were both built on the same foundation. So I don't know if, just like Quantum and Solstice were built using similar designs, if the Millennium class shares a strong resemblance to this class on the inside. I'm not sure if you know, on the Millennium class, you'll see some more crossover, and that could be why it doesn't quite match up. But the main thing that you notice when you come on board the Radiance class ship is that the centrum is very awkwardly positioned. Where most ships, you would see to my left the main elevators, and you kind of have your main lobby with the staircase and elevators all together. On the Radiance class, you actually have your staircase to the left in the normal position, but your elevators are actually shifted to be on the port side, with 2 of them inside the centrum and an additional, I believe, 4 of them that are facing the outside with glass elevators looking out over the ocean as you're going up and down. And in my opinion, that really kind of throws the whole ship off. But as you move around, you really notice that more than any other element of the design, I think, because on all the floors, things are not symmetrical. The elevators are on one side, not the other, so that symmetry is completely lost. And as you flow through the ship, it extends beyond that. There's a lot of areas where that symmetry is kind of off, and in some cases it leaves things feeling a little disjointed and awkward as you move around, which is a little surprising, I thought. One of the main areas you really see that is when you go down to the movie theater on deck number 5. The shops, of course, on the Grandeur kind of did an X shape, and they continued straight through. On the Radiance class, though, it's more of a single path that kind of does an S from the port side as you exit the centrum to exit over on the starboard side and head through the photo gallery and the art gallery before reaching the Coral Theater. And at that point, you're right in front of the one entrance on the starboard side, which everybody kind of goes into. On the other side of the ship, on the port side, you have a second entrance that's across from the conference center. So rarely you see people really enter that, and as a result, the theater kind of fills disproportionately as everyone's entering one side. And then at the end of the shows, it really kind of bottlenecks things as everybody comes out both doors, but there's only one passageway to get through. And you see that in a couple places. It's also present in the main dining room on deck number 4. You can enter on the port side, but the starboard side is a private dining area, so you can only get in on one side. On the Windjammer, it's a similar situation. You can get in on the port side right off of the elevator lobby, but you can't on the starboard side, so once again you've got just one pathway that kind of does an S through the Windjammer to get back to the food. So it really kind of feels a little awkward and not really in line with many of the other ships that have a very symmetrical and clear layout to them. This one is a little disjointed in my opinion. You get used to it after a little while, but it does seem to have a much bigger learning curve than even the Oasis class, which is a surprisingly simplistic design to understand. And that really is primarily because those elevators are shifted 90 degrees. The other thing that I found kind of surprising about this class of ships is it's focused on the light and on the ocean views, just like the Vision class was, but it seems like the Vision class is actually more connected to the ocean. On this class, I actually feel more like the Voyage of the Freedom or the Oasis class in the connection to the ocean. There's windows in some places, but you really don't have that overwhelming ocean connection feel like you do on the Vision class. On like the Grandeur, you have the huge walls of glass on either side of the centrum that really light it up, and if you've never been on it, those floors are actually disconnected from the glass, so it is truly a large window that spans multiple decks with the floors set back a little bit to allow that light to flow through the whole area. On this class, you've got it on the one side with the elevators, of course, but the elevators and the walls involved in that really blocks the majority of that light from actually reaching into the centrum, it feels like a lot of times. And on the other side, things are a little more enclosed as well, with bars and other elements in the way that you don't truly get all that light inside the centrum to really bring the ship to life. So you kind of get that enclosed feeling that you get on, of course, the larger ships. So that was a little bit surprising. There are other areas, though, of course, where you have more connection, like the Windjammer. Another one of those oddities where it's the only Windjammer I've seen that actually has a map as you're entering to explain how the place is laid out, because the first portion covers your indoor seating and has all your food stations. And of course that feels similar to a normal Windjammer. It's actually more aligned with the Quantum class Windjammer with the islands than it is with any of the other classes that I've been on. And then that area also has a side room that you can eat in, but beyond that it then has a whole second section of outdoor fully enclosed seating areas. And then in the back you have an area that is fully exposed, very similar to the back end of the Quantum class. And that is a large area with a lot of tables that you can use to sit in. On a day like today where it was rather warm out, you could have sat out there. The only problem was, since unusually the wind was actually coming from the back of the ship towards the front, all that wind was blowing in there, so it was rather chilly and very windy back there, so you really couldn't use any of those tables. And as a result, so far this sailing, every time that I've gone in there for breakfast or lunch, you've had to hunt for a table. You spend a good 5-10 minutes, even more than that, sometimes looking just for a place to sit so that you can put your stuff down and then go get your food, because if you get your food first, you end up just wandering around and your food gets cold. So it really does not seem to function, which is unusual considering that this ship's been in Alaska for the last several months, and I'm sure up there it's even colder and even fewer people are willing to sit outside. So I'm not sure how it normally handles it. I'm sure it works great in San Juan, but it really doesn't seem to flow well. It seems very crowded, much more crowded than any of the other Windjammers that I've ever seen on a ship. And that's surprising because the rest of the ship is surprisingly empty. The Centrum is huge. Even when they have these events, it still seems rather empty. The theater seems to have tons of empty seats in it all the time. The main dining room seems empty. The entire ship feels like it is much bigger than the capacity that it's able to carry, which is a great thing because, of course, we know some of the other classes get overcrowded. So this one, luckily, is a very spacious class, except for that Windjammer. Just seems a little bit too enclosed and small when they can't use those outdoor space, which unfortunately has been the case so far. Hopefully tomorrow in San Francisco, as will be docked, and should have decent weather. We'll hopefully be able to use the outdoor areas more, and that'll, I believe, alleviate a lot of that overcrowding that we've been seeing so far this voyage. Beyond that, though, this ship really does stand out. It is a very unique ship, in my opinion, whereas the Voyage or the Freedom Oasis really kind of feel similar. Same with the Vision class, you can see that connection. This one, like the Quantum class, really feels like a standout ship, one that is unique compared to the rest. And just like the Quantum class, and I believe I mentioned this the other night with Safari Club, there are a lot of elements of the ship that just feel really well done with the theming. Even the Windjammer is very well laid out with the theming. It is very detailed. A lot of nautical elements. There's some really neat lights in there, and of course for dinner they dim the main lights and use those accent lights for the primary lighting, and it really creates some cool effects. The theater, of course, has some really neat lighting effects to it across the entire ship. There are areas that you can just spot really interesting theming and details to them, which isn't the case on, I think, the Voyager and Freedom and the Oasis class. There are some little details, but things are just so big on those that they don't put as much detail into some of the small areas. One of the areas that is really heavily detailed is the schooner bar. It is a very long and thin schooner bar on the ship, but as you enter it, there's a ton of extra art pieces to look at that are really kind of interesting and show off just the level of detail that is found throughout the ship. You also, just like the Quantum class, have a lot of seating around the ship. Right now, I'm in one of those seating areas known as the Yacht Club up on deck number 10, and it is actually one of those features that I found on the Voyager and Freedom class as well. In their atriums, every single level has a little seating area at the end, whether it be a library, the online club. There's some element that takes place on every single floor rather than putting everything on two decks like the Vision class and the older ones do. They actually did spread some of the things vertically through the entire Centrum, and that, of course, is found on the larger ships as well as this Radiance class here. And throughout the day, As you walk around, you often will find people sitting and reading in almost every single one of these areas, so they certainly do get used, and that is one of the things that really makes this class feel more like that quantum class. There's a lot of elements like that, a lot of different areas and nooks and crannies in the ship that you can find to sit and relax. You see a lot of people, of course, in the Safari Club, which is the more obvious solution, but as well as these little areas. So I would not consider the Radiance class to be my favorite class. It's one that I've been looking forward to trying for a long time. I know a lot of people consider it their favorite class, but for me, I think the Quantum class is still number one. I think it still tops this ship, and of course, there are 4 of them. You've got the Jewel, the Radiance, the Brilliance, and the Serenade that all share this similar design to them. But it's still a very nice ship, and some of the elements that kind of seem to put it ahead are the fact that it is not oasis-sized yet, with some of the things I mentioned the other night with the signage outside the theater. At the same time, I think once she does get oasis-sized, a lot of those improvements will really make this ship feel new. It'll really bring some extra life into it. A lot of the Centrum elements, where it does feel a little bit stale, will really come to life with the lighting, and of course the aerialist that we'll be getting will really fill this space up. They do have a nice centerpiece hanging from the ceiling, which will unfortunately be removed, but I think overall those aerialists really do bring more to the ship, and when that does happen, I think this ship, like the rest of the Radiance class, are probably going to really be much improved compared to what I'm experiencing on board right now. Because I do, of course, have to compare it to the Grandeur. They are very similar designs with similar purposes, just separated by about 8 years, I believe. And with the Oasis sizing, I actually have a hard time saying that the Jewel is actually superior to the Grandeur, because the Oasis sizing actually makes several elements of the Grandeur feel more advanced, newer, and more useful. So they are actually very similar, which is surprising considering their age difference, and they do have a slight size difference, but I believe the Oasis sizing will help push the Radiance class back ahead of the Vision class. And of course, 3 of the ships have already received it, and the Jewel will get hers in April to join the rest of the fleet. But that does it for today's full sea day, the only sea day on this voyage. Tomorrow morning, I'll be getting up bright and early. It's currently about 12:30 a.m. And at 5:30, we'll be picking up the pilot before passing under the Golden Gate Bridge at roughly 6:15 a.m. And then, of course, arriving in San Francisco for overnight at 7 a.m. So be sure to tune in tomorrow to hear all about that journey.